The night was calm, but a storm of secrets was about to break beneath the surface. The world of organized crime had moved beyond dark alleys and coded signals. It now thrived in encrypted chats and digital whispers, hidden from the prying eyes of law enforcement. Crime had become a shadow, slipping away faster than anyone could trace. And its players, drug lords, arms dealers, syndicate leaders, were protected by technology that no one had been able to pierce. Then came Anom. Marketed as the ultimate secret keeper, it was a phone designed for those who couldn't afford mistakes. No GPS, no browsing history, and a hidden app disguised behind a calculator icon allowed plans to be made and whispers to stay hidden in the digital void. For criminals, it was everything they had dreamed of, a lifeline they trusted completely. But while they plotted, an unseen force was listening. The underworld didn't know that each message sent through Anom was quietly feeding back to the people they sought to avoid. As the messages came in, law enforcement tracked every movement, every secret, every deal. They waited patiently, drawing closer, watching as the players moved toward a finish they never expected. The trap was set. The final act of the game was near, and not a single soul on the inside saw it coming. Before Anom and its role in exposing global criminal networks, there was another iconic device that played a pivotal role in the world of secure communications: BlackBerry. BlackBerry, once a dominant force in the mobile phone industry, was especially popular among business professionals and later among criminal organizations due to its reputation for security. Known for its sturdy build, physical keyboard, and most notably its secure email system, BlackBerry phones became synonymous with encrypted communication. However, this reputation would eventually make them a target for law enforcement agencies worldwide. In the early 2000s, BlackBerry was the go-to smartphone for anyone who needed reliable communication. Its unique email service, BlackBerry Messenger (BBM), offered one of the most secure forms of messaging at the time. BlackBerry's end-to-end encryption meant that messages sent via BBM were nearly impossible for anyone, even government agencies, to intercept. This feature quickly made it the phone of choice for a variety of high-profile users, including business executives, politicians, and perhaps more notoriously, criminals. As organized crime syndicates flourished, particularly in the realm of drug cartels and arms smuggling, BlackBerry became an essential tool. Criminal organizations across Latin America, Europe, and Asia were using BlackBerry devices to coordinate their operations, from drug trafficking routes to money laundering schemes. The allure for criminals was clear. BlackBerry offered an encrypted, reliable, and discreet way to communicate, giving them a sense of invulnerability. Law enforcement, unable to decrypt BBM messages, was often left in the dark about these illegal operations. For a time, BlackBerry phones became the standard tool of choice for criminal syndicates. Drug cartels such as the Mexican Sinaloa cartel were known to rely on BBM to communicate across borders and manage their illicit operations. The Hells Angels, notorious motorcycle gangs, and arms dealers also favored BlackBerry devices. It was said that at one point, nearly half of the phones in Mexico were BlackBerries, many of them in the hands of criminals. But while criminals were enjoying this technological advantage, law enforcement agencies were scrambling. The secure encrypted messages sent via BlackBerry made it virtually impossible for agencies like the FBI, DEA, and others to track and intercept these communications. At the time, it felt like criminals had found the perfect tool to stay one step ahead of the law. In 2010, as the usage of BlackBerry for criminal purposes surged, governments and law enforcement agencies began to take action. Countries like India, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates (UAE) pushed back against BlackBerry's encrypted services, demanding that they grant authorities access to the communications on their devices. This led to intense debates over privacy and security. Should companies like BlackBerry be forced to allow governments to break encryption and access private conversations in the name of national security? BlackBerry responded by asserting that it would not compromise its encryption policies, emphasizing the importance of privacy. Despite BlackBerry's efforts to maintain its reputation as the gold standard for secure communications, the company eventually started to falter in the consumer market. The rise of iPhones and Android devices, with more user-friendly interfaces, app ecosystems, and modern designs, made BlackBerry's once dominant hardware feel outdated. However, during this period of decline, criminal organizations that relied heavily on BlackBerry were still entrenched in using these devices. The problem for law enforcement was that BlackBerry's encryption was still mostly impenetrable, even as the company itself was shifting its focus toward a new business model. But BlackBerry's downfall also marked the beginning of law enforcement's turn towards alternative methods to crack down on criminal communication. With BlackBerry becoming less relevant in the mainstream market, law enforcement agencies began developing new techniques such as leveraging informants, intercepting calls and messages, and working with other tech companies. They knew they couldn't rely on BlackBerry forever, so they needed to adapt to the next generation of encrypted communication. Anom was conceived and developed as part of a joint effort by the FBI and the Australian Federal Police, AFP. By the time Anom came into the picture, BlackBerry had lost much of its luster as the go-to device for criminals. However, it still lingered in certain criminal circles. The FBI and Australian Federal Police recognized the need for a more sophisticated solution to combat this issue and knew that criminals had moved beyond just using BlackBerry. They were now leveraging more advanced encrypted apps and devices. The birth of Anom wasn't just the beginning of a new device. It was the dawn of a daring, high-stakes operation that would unfold like a thriller.
Police search warrant!
For years, law enforcement had been struggling, watching helplessly as organized crime slipped further into the digital world. With the rise of encrypted communication, criminals had found a way to operate in plain sight while remaining virtually untouchable. It was as if an entire underworld had gone dark, and no one knew how to switch the lights back on. In the quiet halls of the FBI's cyber unit, agents were desperate. They combed through complex cases that went cold, poring over trails that led to dead ends, running scenarios, and brainstorming solutions that often ended in frustration. The criminals they were chasing were always a step ahead. Crime had evolved, becoming a digital phantom that seemed to move faster than the reach of the law. Yet in those bleak, windowless rooms, an idea emerged, quietly at first, then spreading like wildfire. The concept was bold, almost reckless, but as the agents talked it over, they realized it might just work. The plan was simple in theory: create a secure device, market it as the most reliable, encrypted communication tool ever made, and offer it to criminals on a silver platter. If law enforcement couldn't break into the encrypted communications, why not create the platform themselves? They would develop a device so trusted, so secure, that the criminal world would flock to it. And every single message sent on that device would go straight to the FBI. It was the ultimate Trojan horse, a device that would seem to be the holy grail of privacy, but would be a digital trap. The FBI knew this would require an all-new approach. They would need a device that criminals would trust implicitly, one that catered to their specific needs and reinforced their sense of security. It had to be more than just a phone. It had to feel like a lifeline, an unbreakable shield against law enforcement. They decided on a name that would convey both mystery and trust: Anom. The engineering of Anom was no small feat. The FBI had to design it meticulously, thinking through every detail that a high-level criminal might scrutinize. They stripped away anything that could betray the user's location or identity. No GPS, no social media apps, no browsing history, just the basics, wrapped in a cloak of absolute discretion. The device had to look like a regular smartphone on the outside, but inside it was a stripped-down fortress of supposed privacy. The true magic of Anom lay in the hidden app, disguised behind an innocuous calculator icon. To the casual observer, the app would look like a standard calculator. But with a secret passcode, users could unlock an encrypted messaging platform that promised total security. Criminals could chat, send images, and share plans without leaving a trace, or so they believed. Behind this clever facade, however, was a piece of code embedded by the FBI. Each message sent on Anom would pass through an invisible backdoor, allowing the FBI to intercept and store every word, every transaction, and every piece of criminal correspondence. It was a masterstroke of deception, creating a device that felt impervious but was, in reality, a direct line to law enforcement. Creating the device was only half the battle. The real challenge was getting it into the hands of criminals without raising suspicion. The FBI knew they couldn't simply put Anom on the open market. It had to feel exclusive, elite, something that only those in the know could access. So they carefully crafted a cover story for Anom, launching it as an invitation-only product, whispered about in the dark corners of the underworld. It was marketed as the latest tool for serious players who needed absolute discretion, a device created by former hackers and encryption experts. Through undercover agents and informants, the FBI began leaking Anom to the black market. Trusted contacts spread the word, suggesting Anom as the device for those who couldn't risk exposure. The FBI seeded it with carefully chosen criminals, ensuring that it reached the top circles. As word spread, demand grew. Anom became a coveted tool, seen as a badge of trustworthiness and security. It was like a secret code. To have an Anom was to be part of the inner circle. Soon, crime bosses, drug cartels, and syndicate leaders were using Anom to coordinate their operations. They sent messages detailing drug shipments, laundering schemes, hit contracts, and money transfers, believing they were speaking in a secure digital fortress. Every message, every deal, and every move they made was being quietly collected by the FBI. They had been lured into a trap so perfect that they didn't even know they were caught. From a covert FBI control room, agents watched as Anom's messages flowed in. It was like flipping on a light in a darkened room. Suddenly, they could see the intricate connections between criminal networks across the globe. The information pouring in was staggering. In real time, agents were able to see where drug shipments were headed, who was orchestrating assassinations, and how rival gangs communicated with one another. But the FBI had to play it smart. They couldn't act on every piece of intel, or criminals would grow suspicious. Instead, they began to strategically use the information, sending anonymous tips to local law enforcement, foiling just enough plans to keep criminals on their toes while preserving Anom's cover. The deeper the criminals trusted Anom, the more valuable the intelligence became. The FBI was watching entire criminal empires unfold, but they needed patience. This was a long game, and their final move would be one for the history books. The FBI knew that the time would come when they would have to reveal Anom's true purpose. They couldn't keep up the deception forever, especially as word of law enforcement successes began to circulate in the underworld. For nearly 3 years, they gathered information, allowing criminal networks to use Anom without interference. The FBI tracked, recorded, and built a case so strong that it would be impossible to refute. The grand plan, Operation Trojan Shield, was waiting in the wings. But for now, the FBI watched quietly, observing as criminals across the globe unwittingly fed them the details of their operations, their deals, their betrayals. Anom was their greatest triumph, a hidden eye into the darkest depths of organized crime, an unprecedented sting operation that would soon shake the criminal world to its core. When the time finally came to reveal Anom, the FBI knew it would be explosive. But until then, they waited in silence, biding their time, watching as their Trojan horse continued to do its work. They had created a masterpiece of deception, and it was only a matter of time before it changed everything.
Up some of the country's most notorious crime gangs, and it was all thanks to a mobile phone app. The global operation was led by the FBI, with Australian police playing a key role. They managed to get the gangs to use an encrypted messaging app and then spied on their every move for 3 years. More than 200 people have been arrested in Australia in a campaign labelled the most significant operation in policing history.
The Anom crackdown, part of the larger Operation Trojan Shield, was a monumental law enforcement operation that exposed and dismantled numerous international crime syndicates using encrypted communication.
Today, the Australian government, as part of a global operation, has struck a heavy blow against organised crime.
This operation, which spanned multiple countries including the United States, Australia, and others, involved the infiltration of a secure messaging app used by criminals around the world, resulting in hundreds of arrests and the seizure of illicit goods, including drugs, firearms, and millions of dollars.
Our Australian Federal Police has worked hand in glove with the US FBI to bring down some of the most significant criminals, not just here in Australia, but right around the world.
The Anom crackdown culminated in Operation Trojan Shield, which led to the largest coordinated international law enforcement action against criminal networks in recent history.
Single person who used Anom used it for a criminal purpose. The criminals using these devices believed they were secretly planning crimes far beneath the radar of law enforcement. But in reality, the criminals were not underneath the radar. They were on it.
The amount of intelligence that we received was staggering. From seizing drugs, guns, and millions of dollars in multiple currencies, to addressing more than 150 threats to life.
The criminal users didn't know that for more than 18 months, the FBI captured more than 27 million messages between users around the world who had their criminal discussions reviewed, recorded, and translated by the FBI.
Some of the key outcomes of the crackdown included arrests. More than 800 criminals were arrested across 18 countries, including high-profile criminals involved in organized crime, drug trafficking, money laundering, and arms dealing. Numerous crime syndicates were effectively disrupted, with many of their operations incapacitated or permanently destroyed. The Anom crackdown had profound effects on criminal organizations operating in multiple regions. Drug cartels. The Mexican cartels, among other groups, were heavily affected by the crackdown as many of their leaders were either arrested or went into hiding. The success of Operation Trojan Shield demonstrated the increasing cooperation between international law enforcement agencies.
Until the Anom platform was taken down yesterday.
After the success of the crackdown, the Anom phones were deactivated, and criminals were no longer able to use the app for secure communications. However, the legacy of the operation is significant, as it revealed just how vulnerable even the most advanced encryption systems could be when law enforcement agencies have the right tools and strategies. Ultimately, the Anom crackdown serves as a major victory in the fight against organized crime, showing that no matter how secure criminals believe their communications to be, law enforcement can still find ways to break through.